A blaze wiped out my home in a terrifying inferno. At 65, I turned to my son's house for shelter, only for him to shut the door, saying his fiancée required some space. In a bind, I reached out to my old flame, someone I hadn't laid eyes on in 40 years. As he swung open the entrance to his grand estate, he uttered a mere 3 words, "You've returned at last." That moment upended my world completely. But hold on a sec. Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. It's amazing to see how our tales spread across the globe. I'm Grace, and at 65, I figured I'd weathered every hardship life had in store. Boy, was I mistaken. The ordeal kicked off on an ordinary Wednesday in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was in the kitchen brewing my midday brew when a weird odor caught my nose. Curious, I went to investigate, suspecting I'd forgotten something on the burner. Pushing open the door to the living room, I faced a choking haze so dense it blurred my vision. Fire was already devouring the drapes and climbing the walls at an alarming pace, freezing me in place for those vital moments. The alarm should have wailed, but I learned afterward the battery had given out ages ago. That tiny slip-up erased every possession I cherished. I dashed back to the kitchen, groping for the phone to summon help from the firefighters. But the fumes filled every corner, choking my lungs and clouding my mind. Crash of shattering glass echoed, signaling I was out of time. The blaze was ravaging my place with unstoppable fury. Survival was my sole focus. I snatched my handbag from the table and fled through the rear exit. The final glimpse inside was the photo of Robert, my departed spouse, charring under the intense warmth. By the time I staggered onto the lawn, hacking and wheezing, the neighbors had gathered outside. My 78-year-old neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, hurried to my side first, embracing me tightly as we stared in anguish at the inferno, claiming the dwelling I'd called home for more than 4 decades. The crew pulled up after 10 minutes, yet the damage was irreversible. They prevented the flames from leaping to adjacent properties, but my house was a goner. Within 1 hour, 40 years of keepsakes turned to cinders. The dining spot where David tackled his schoolwork, the walls etched with traces of his childhood height, the sleeping quarters Robert and I occupied for 37 years, all obliterated. I lingered curbside, draped in a throw blanket from a kind soul as the responders battled on. Eventually, they'd explain it stemmed from a faulty wire in an aging outlet in the lounge, a basic glitch that shattered my existence. Once the fire died down, nothing remained but a scorched, smoldering shell. The chief came over, his features streaked with grime, gaze brimming with sympathy I could hardly stomach then. "Deepest apologies, ma'am. We gave it our all." But he trailed off, unnecessary really. I witnessed the devastation firsthand, complete devastation. Aside from what I wore and carried in my bag, all my belongings had evaporated. The fortunate folks next door with intact roofs hosted me that initial evening. Kind-hearted Mrs. Jenkins urged me to crash at hers. Though her cozy flat overflowed with grandkids on a visit, the Red Cross had temporary lodgings ready, but bunking in a vast hall amid unfamiliar faces deepened my sense of isolation. That's when I realized David was my only option. He resides roughly 40 minutes out in Valentine, an upscale enclave near Charlotte, featuring leafy avenues and residences that could grace a glossy spread. He'd relocated there 4 years back after earning a bump to district head at his insurance firm. Our bond wasn't tight, not the ideal mother-son connection, but he represented my remaining kin. I borrowed Mrs. Jenkins' line since my device had fused in the heat with the rest. "David, honey, it's your mom," I murmured, voice feebler than planned. "Mom, everything all right? You seem shaken." "The place burned down, kiddo. Lost it all." Silence stretched on forever. "You okay? No injuries. Just some minor cuts and a raspy throat from the haze. But I need somewhere to crash till I sort this mess. Short term only." Another beat. "Of course, Mom. Head my way. We'll sort it." The wave of ease hit so hard I almost buckled. My boy would step up. No matter the emotional gaps, the ignored rings, the strained festive meals, he was mine. The following morning, I gazed at the smoldering wreckage, awaiting the claims rep. He arrived sharp at 9, a fresh-faced fellow who appeared eager to wrap up, clipboard and lens in hand, assessing the remnants of my abode. Full wipeout, he declared matter-of-factly, oblivious to how those terms encapsulated all my life, gone in an instant. "How much?" I inquired, even though I feared the response. "Apparently, your coverage amounted to around $200,000 for the building, but factoring in the deductible and wear and tear, it might come to about $90,000 or possibly even lower. Rebuilding 42 years of existence for $90,000, it felt utterly inconceivable. Mrs. Jenkins assisted me in purchasing essentials like clothing and personal items using the crisis funds from the Red Cross. Every possession I had left could squeeze into a single borrowed valise. That summed up my remnants of the world I'd created. The trip to David's place resembled traveling to an unfamiliar land. When you've got no home to return to, the world shifts in strange ways. Places I knew well, the filling station where I'd grab my lotto cards, the cafe where Robert and I shared lazy Sunday meals, all appeared tied to another person's story. David's area remained as pristine as ever. Flawless grass, impeccable paths, uninterrupted routines carrying on seamlessly from yesterday. I sensed myself as an outsider, dragging my sorrow into their orderly domain. His home was a classic 2-level colonial, featuring white window covers and a crimson entrance chosen by Victoria, his betrothed. I'd encountered her precisely 3 times over the 2 years of their relationship. At 30, she was younger than his 39 years. She held a position at a city center ad agency and voiced views on matters from paint shades to evening beverage selections. I maneuvered the taxi up their drive and paused briefly, mustering my resolve. This won't last forever, I reassured myself, merely until I sort out the following steps, until the payout arrives and I secure a modest rental elsewhere. I never dreamed that approaching my boy's doorstep clutching that modest loaned bag would rank among the toughest moments of my existence. Yet as I lifted my fist to rap, a deep unease washed over me, that empty void echoing the day Robert passed, like the ground vanishing underfoot. I simply hadn't realized the extent of the plunge awaiting me. David swung the door wide just before my knock, as though he'd been peering out for my arrival. For a fleeting second, gazing at his recognizable features, Robert's gaze, my own determined jaw, sparked a glimmer of hope that things could mend. He was my boy, my sole offspring. Family ties had to count for something. "Mom," he uttered, moving back to allow entry, though his tone carried an elusive edge, perhaps detachment or unease. Victoria materialized right behind him, like she'd been poised off stage. She sported crisp white denim and a luxurious blouse, likely pricier than my former monthly food budget. Her chestnut locks were swept into a casual yet elegant topknot. Her grin was polite, but didn't warm her gaze. "Grace, that's awful about your home," she remarked. Yet her eyes fixed on my worn bag, bypassing me entirely. David filled me in on the details. I set the bag in their spotless foyer, abruptly aware of my disheveled state. My fresh, inexpensive outfit clashed with the gleaming stone flooring. Faint traces of smoke lingered in my strands, even after bathing at Mrs. Jenkins's. "This is only short-term," I hastened to explain, "until I regain my footing." David and Victoria shared a quick look, that silent partner exchange sealing off the rest of us. Robert and I had shared similar ones endlessly, but witnessing it now felt like exclusion from some private society. "Why don't we take a seat and discuss?" David suggested, leading me to the lounge. Their space gleamed like a feature in a glossy publication, all elements coordinated. Zero disorder. Pale couches that seemed untouched by use. Clear tabletops mirroring sunlight from panes so spotless they blended with the air. It was the sort of dwelling where you'd hesitate to disturb a thing. I perched on the sofa's brink, keeping my inexpensive footwear steady on the unmarred wood planks. Victoria spotted it and winced faintly. "So, what's your strategy?" David queried, easing into the chair facing me rather than beside on the couch where he might have offered a comforting embrace to his upset parent, but across, like we were negotiating a deal. The claims expert mentioned it could span a couple of weeks to wrap up, or up to a month. I was counting on crashing here meantime, just till I line up a tiny flat or similar. The quiet that ensued dragged on roughly 10 seconds too far. I observed Victoria's expression shift. Her mouth set subtly. She reached across and rested her palm on David's sleeve, a move seeming caring yet unmistakably claiming. "Mom," David started, and his inflection signaled the words ahead would shatter me. "The issue is, Victoria and I discussed it, and we cherish our personal space here. Our jobs demand long days, and this place is our retreat, if you get the picture." I just stood there, eyes fluttering in confusion. I wouldn't get underfoot. I'd stay out of sight. I'd pitch in with meals and chores. I wouldn't cause any trouble. Victoria inched closer, her tone gentle yet resolute. "It's not about causing trouble, Grace. It's about room to breathe. This place is our initial nest as a pair, and we're still syncing up our lives." "I'm his mom," I snapped, the reply sharper than I'd meant. "Naturally you are," Victoria responded seamlessly. "And that's precisely why we figured you'd thrive better elsewhere, in a spot where you could claim your own freedom while you pick up the pieces." I turned to David, hoping he'd shoot her down, recall that I was the one who'd nursed him through endless nights of illness, pulled extra hours to cover his textbooks, gripped his hand during that messy split 3 years back when his former spouse ditched him for her fitness coach. But no, he just dipped his head. "Victoria's spot on, Mom. We reckon you'd feel more at ease in your private digs." Those words slammed into me like a gut punch. My ribs actually tightened, as though invisible hands were crushing my breath. "More at ease, David. Yesterday I lost it all. Every last bit. And you figure I'd prefer isolating in some motel over being here with kin. It needn't be a motel." Victoria jumped in fast. "There are charming long-term spots by the shopping center, spotless, secure, with tiny kitchens for your own meals." I gawked at this intruder who'd entered my boys' world just 2 years prior, dictating my next move after my house vanished. "And how exactly am I footing the bill for your charming long-term haven? The payout from insurance is ages away." David fidgeted. "I could chip in some, maybe a couple hundred to tide you over. A couple hundred." Like I was some far-flung cousin he scarcely recalled, not the one who'd birthed him. "David," I murmured, voice faint as a breath. "I swapped your nappies. I soothed you past those wailing fits. I guided you on that first wobbly bike ride. And I quizzed you through assignments. I comforted you after Lucia Velasco shattered your teenage heart." His features flickered with unease, yet Victoria clamped his arm tighter. "Nobody's doubting your past," she cut in. "We're only suggesting clearer lines for all involved." Lines. That term echoed from the counselor David consulted post-split. All about drawing lines. "You're shoving me aside," I stated bluntly. "We're not shoving you," David objected. "We're merely proposing this setup might not suit anybody. Who cooked up this plan?" I probed. Sure, I knew the culprit. I spotted it in Victoria's subtle retreat, pleased as if she'd scored a point. "We hashed it out as a team," David claimed, though his gaze dodged mine. I rose unhurriedly, joints popping to underscore my 65 years and utter solitude. "Got it. Mom, come on, don't take it that way. We're aiming for the greater good here, the greater good." I echoed the phrase like it was gibberish. "What'd serve the greater good, David, is your mom not crashing on the curb come nightfall." Victoria's flawlessly groomed features twisted into feigned worry. "No one's facing the curb. As I mentioned, choices abound." I scanned their immaculate den once more, the framed shots of David and Victoria, excluding me. The pricey couches meant for show, not use. My son, who'd picked this icy stunner over his flesh and blood. You're onto something, I conceded at last. Choices are everywhere. I grabbed my modest bag. It dragged heavier, aware of the rejection now. David got to his feet, awkward but not enough to rethink it. I'll ring you soon, he offered. Once you're sorted. Save it, I replied, startled by my even tone. I hate trespassing on your haven. Victoria mustered a hint of guilt, but zilch to intervene. Nothing like, hold up, this ain't right. She's family. I exited that flawless abode with its flawless duo and flawless lines, lingering on the pavement ages before dragging myself onward. From the bay window, I glimpsed David and Victoria chatting, likely griping about my stubbornness, the chaos I was dumping on their serene world. The twist didn't escape me. Since Robert passed, I'd convinced myself I was tough, self-reliant, needing no one. Yet now, in real crisis, I learned self-reliance is just a perk for those with backups. I trudged to a cheap motel nearby and blew nearly my final cash on a single night's stay. Perched on the stiff mattress, eyeing the chipped paint, I pondered a 65-year-old's path with scant funds and a lone bag of bargain outfits. That's when I recalled the business card tucked away in my wallet for almost 4 decades, somehow spared from the blaze since it had been on me at the time. Now brittle and faded, edges worn thin from endless years of safekeeping. It belonged to someone I'd cherished back when the future stretched out endlessly and hope felt boundless. Randall Galloway, the fellow who'd vowed to return for me. A pledge made just before fate stepped in, and that day slipped away forever. I endured 3 restless nights in that rundown motel before mustering the nerve to dial. Nights where I'd jolt awake with aches from the lumpy bed and a bitter sense of regret lingering on my tongue. Nights filled with the echoes of quarrels down the corridor and the relentless hum of cars beyond the flimsy panes. Nights spent rinsing my scant purchases in the cramped sink and draping them over the lone seat to air dry. The card crinkled like old parchment in my grasp, smoothed by 40 years of portability without purpose. Randall Galloway appeared in smudged azure script. Below it, a contact with an unfamiliar prefix. Flipped over, in my own eager scrawl from back then, never forget G. I jotted that at 25, convinced in the unshakable faith of that age that Randall would define my forever romance. He was 26, with raven locks tumbling across his brow and gaze like warm honey. Fresh out of school, he labored at his dad's building outfit and harbored visions of greater achievements, crafting legacies that lasted. Our courtship lasted 9 months, an age at 25. He'd whisk me to the scenic bluff beyond town where we'd perch on his vehicle's front and share our aspirations. I'm launching my venture, he'd declare, maybe in building trades or property ventures, one that'll build our wealth so I can offer you the world. I'll return for you, Grace, he assured me the evening prior to his Atlanta assignment. I'll carve out my path and then come claim you as my wife. Yet vows at 25 often dissolve under the weight of reality's demands. At first, his notes arrived lengthy and fervent, brimming with ambitions and schemes. Mine replied with updates on my bank position, affirming my steadfast weight as sworn. Gradually, they shortened, arriving sporadically. Half a year on, when Robert crossed my path at a parish gathering, Randall seemed like a vivid reverie too perfect for truth. Robert offered stability, dependability, 32 already, secure in telecom work. He didn't dangle grand visions, just a home, kin, and solid ground. After 5 months together, his proposal drew my affirmative. I slipped Randall's card into my bridal gown's fold, a hidden charm I couldn't discard. 4 decades onward, holed up in a musty motel reeking of mold and old smoke, I pondered the fate of that idealistic soul with the honeyed stare. I'd tracked his progress in fits and starts over time, as one does with initial flames. Via shared acquaintances, word came he'd fulfilled his oaths, founded a building enterprise, risen to prominence. He stayed single to others' astonishment. Too immersed in erecting his domain, they figured. Galloway had ever been driven, folks noted. Latest whisper, perhaps 8 years back, placed his outfit growing past North Carolina into Atlanta, Georgia, and Miami, Florida. Galloway Development erecting retail hubs and corporate towers. The lad from the family firm had evolved into a figure in fine attire, steering choices impacting multitudes. Why would such a success spare a thought for a 65-year-old bereft spouse bunking in a low-end lodge with just a bag of discount attire? Logic in my mind branded it absurd, even pitiful. You don't reach out after 4 decades amid personal ruin. You don't seek out youthful passions when aged, needy, and adrift. Yet logic fades fast when you're scraping coins for another evening's shelter. Come the 4th dawn, desperation peaked. My spine throbbed from the stiff bedding. Funds dwindled and staff had hinted at vacating for incoming guests. At the modest desk, I fixed on the card, fingers quivering more than the dawn's coolness warranted. What words to utter? Randall, it's me, remember. Life's crumbled. Spare aid. That line likely led nowhere, or to an aide dismissing a stranger's tale of bygone ties. But suppose it connected. Suppose his voice came through. My pulse raced as I punched in the digits. Each press mimicked leaping into void. It chimed once, twice. Galloway Development? Randall speaking. His tone had deepened over the years, shaped by the passage of time and the burdens of life, yet it was undeniably his. 4 decades later, I could have picked it out from a crowd. For a split second, I nearly ended the call, nearly pressed that button, and sought help elsewhere. Yet there was a certain gentleness in his inflection, a comforting glow that pierced through the line and enveloped me like a warm embrace, compelling me to respond. Randall, it's Grace. Grace Thorne. Or rather, I'm Grace Roberts these days, though I was once a Thorne. A pause stretched on, long enough that I wondered if the connection had failed, if he disconnected, or if he simply had no clue who I was. Then came Grace, my name uttered like a revelation or a miracle, as though he could scarcely trust his ears. I'm truly sorry to ring you out of the blue, I blurted, the explanation pouring forth in my urgency to clarify before he could cut me off. I realize it's been ages, and I likely shouldn't be reaching out, but I truly had no one else in mind. Where are you calling from? He cut in, his words edged with worry. I'm here in Charlotte, holed up at a place called the Rest Stop, and I know this will sound utterly wild, but my home went up in flames just last week. Everything's gone, and my boy won't have me crashing with him. I have no place to land. The confession rushed out like a flood, each phrase tougher to voice than the one before. Owning up to your child's refusal felt like confessing you'd botched the essence of parenthood itself. Send me the precise location, Randall instructed, his manner shifting to crisp efficiency. I'm on my way to fetch you. That's not necessary. I'm not even sure why I dialed you. Probably just craved a kind ear. Grace. His voice left no room for debate. Give me your spot. I'm heading to my vehicle as we speak. Through the receiver, I caught the click of a door shutting, the rumble of an ignition firing up. He meant it. He was actually en route. This fellow from my distant past, untouched in conversation for 40 years, was shelving his pressing affairs to pull me from some dingy motel. I relayed the details in a hushed tone. Randall, listen. I'm not that young woman from back then anymore. Nor am I, he replied, and I detected the grin in his words. But I've held out 40 years for this very moment. Once we disconnected, the following hour blurred as I gathered my scant possessions, swinging between anxiety and astonishment. What on earth was I getting into? What were we stirring up? This bordered on madness. You couldn't revive a bond after 4 decades as if resuming a chat from the day prior. Still, gazing from the motel pane, anticipating an unfamiliar vehicle bearing a stranger who might not know me at a glance, a sensation stirred that hadn't touched me since the blaze. Optimism. Perhaps it was naive optimism. Perhaps it spelled further letdown, further sorrow, but optimism it was. And at 65, with zilch to forfeit, it merited the gamble. Precisely at 10:45, a sleek silver Mercedes glided to a halt before the building, shining brightly amid the shabby surroundings. I stole glances from the glass as it came to rest, my pulse hammering like a trapped creature against my chest. The glass was shaded, hiding the interior, but an instinct deep within assured me it was him. The motor quieted, and the door on the driver's flank swung wide. Despite the 40 years, despite the silver streaks in his hair and the creases framing his gaze, despite the load of years we'd spent apart, I knew him at once. Randall Galloway emerged from that sedan like he'd stepped straight from my reveries, and when his eyes lifted to the spot where I lingered, the divide of time dissolved between us, as if it had never been. Snatching my bag, I dashed down the steps with the haste of one dreading a vision's fade. He waited beside the vehicle. Randall carried that same easy assurance from his 26th year, but now it gleamed with the polish of achievement and wisdom. Dark trousers and a deep blue pullover clad him, likely pricier than my old monthly food budget. Yet those golden eyes, the ones that had lingered in my nocturnal thoughts for so long, remained unchanged. I yearned to shrink away. I longed to retreat indoors and feign none of this was real. I appeared a mess. My locks hadn't seen scissors in ages. My bargain outfits hung rumpled, and I felt diminished, ordinary next to the poised figure ahead. But his grin was already blooming toward me, sending my heart leaping like I was 25 once more. I approached him deliberately, breath catching in my throat. "Hello, Grace," he murmured gently. "Hello." I discerned the marks the years had etched. His once dark mane was threaded with gray, trimmed neat and executive style. Wrinkles etched the edges of his eyes and curved his lips. His frame had filled out across the chest, grown sturdier, as though prosperity had added substance to his form alongside all else. But his smile revealed the fellow who'd whisked me to scenic vistas and shared his aspirations. "Hello," I whispered back, voice faint. He examined my features intently, those golden eyes absorbing every line. I ached to excuse my disheveled state, for I marveled at the depths I'd sunk to, reaching out to him after 4 decades with only chaos to bring. But he uttered just 3 words that shifted my world. "You look beautiful." Tears welled up instantly, there on the pavement outside that cheap motel with Randall Galloway right beside me. I shattered completely. 40 years of bottled-up grief, 4 days of dread and hopelessness, a whole life of hearing I fell short. It poured out in raw, heaving cries I couldn't rein in. He stayed silent after that. No attempts to quiet me or promise it'd all be okay. He just grabbed my bag in one hand and encircled me with the other as I slumped into his embrace. He carried the scent of fine aftershave and fresh linens, of prosperity and steadiness, of all I'd forfeited and all I'd never known. His knit top felt plush against my face, his grip firm around my quivering frame. "I'm sorry," I gasped into his shirt. "I'm sorry, Randall. I shouldn't have phoned. I shouldn't pull you into this disaster." "Hush," he whispered, his palm gliding down my spine. "You should have reached out ages ago." Once the sobs eased, I stepped back to face him, mortified by the wet spot staining his pricey knit. I must seem like a wreck. He extended a hand and brushed away a stray tear from my face, his contact light as a breath. "You resemble a fighter who's endured torment and come through. That's not wreckage, Grace, that's resilience." I let out a laugh, though it sounded frail and sour. "Resilience? I'm 65. I'm holed up in a flea bag spot because my boy wants nothing to do with me. That's not resilience. That's pitiful." His chin set firm, and briefly I caught a glimpse of the fury he was holding back. "Your boy's an idiot. You don't know him. I don't have to. I know you." He hesitated, his fingers still lightly on my arms. "Or at least, I knew you once. And the Grace Thorne I remember would never abandon anyone desperate, least of all kin. The way he pronounced my old surname, like a cherished secret he'd guarded for years, twisted a pang of nostalgia in my heart for the self I'd left behind. "That was ages past," I replied. "I'm not that young woman now." "Perhaps," he conceded, "but I'd love to discover who she grew into." He stowed my suitcase in the rear of his upscale sedan like it held valuables, not some bargain duffel packed with my remaining worldly goods. As he held open the door on my side, I froze for a second, dazed by how surreal it felt. That very morning of the blaze, I'd owned a home, recollections, an existence crafted across years. Now here I was sliding into the vehicle of a man unseen for 40 years, clueless about the future. "Where to?" I inquired as the motor hummed to life. "Home," he answered plainly. The trip lasted nearly 60 minutes, winding through posher districts until we arrived at a zone unfamiliar to me. Gentle slopes adorned with estates concealed by rock barriers and metal entrances. Foliage that seemed artistically arranged, letterboxes pricier than many folks' rides. Randall veered onto a winding path signaled by a modest metal sign, Galloway. The lane twisted amid established greenery and trimmed lawns before revealing a roundabout forecourt before a dwelling that stole my breath. It lacked gaudiness or show. It exuded refinement, the sort true wealth conveys, understated, assured, designed for endurance. Masonry and timber with lofty panes capturing the midday glow and a veranda beckoning you to linger. "Randall," I breathed, gazing at this emblem of his accomplishments. This is astonishing." He halted the vehicle but lingered inside, staring at the structure as though viewing it anew via my perspective. "It's overly spacious," he murmured softly. "Always was. I constructed it envisioning crowds someday, but—" He lifted his shoulders in a shrug so recognizable it tugged at my soul. "Certain aspirations don't pan out as imagined. You never wed." The words escaped before I could halt them. He swiveled to meet my eyes, face inscrutable. I nearly did twice, yet something felt absent. He held the moment, then added bluntly, "You." That single term lingered in the hushed interior, heavy with 4 decades of might-have-beens and possibilities unrealized. I yearned to probe his intent, to grasp how I could have been absent from an existence I'd never shared. Yet before words formed, he'd exited, circling to assist me out. The interior proved even more captivating. Polished timber flooring, glowing warm as amber, soaring vaults, pieces that could grace design journals yet warmed rather than chilled like exhibits. Volumes lined every shelf, cozy seats angled by the glass, snapshots casually arrayed on side tables. It evoked a true dwelling, occupied by a real person, beyond mere display of triumphs. "Feeling peckish?" Randall inquired, guiding me to a cooking space grander than back in my former sitting room. I was on the verge of fixing myself some food right when your ring came through. It hit me then how ravenous I truly was. That morning spread at the inn had consisted of nothing more than dry bread and watery brew, leaving my gut twisting from hunger and anxiety alike. I started with, "I hate to impose," but he silenced me with a glance. "Grace. Enough. You're no imposition. You are." He hesitated, hunting for the right phrasing. "You are the solution to a puzzle I've pondered for 4 decades, as he prepared the meal. And he genuinely understood the art of cooking, navigating that vast kitchen with the confidence of a man who'd mastered self-sufficiency over the years. I examined the snapshots strewn across the space. Randall at opening events, gripping hands with prominent figures. Randall alongside different ladies at fundraisers and corporate banquets, his grin ever present, yet somehow incomplete. "Share your story with me," he suggested, setting down a dish of flawlessly seared poultry and baked produce before me. "Share about Robert, your boy. All the moments I lost out on." And so I opened up, During a midday spread that felt divine following weeks of subpar lodging fare, I described my union with Robert, reliable and cozy, offering stability and closeness, though lacking in fervor. About David, the child I'd craved with such intensity and cherished with unyielding devotion, who matured into a distant figure, prioritizing his partner's ease over his parents' pleas. I recounted the stretch of devoted spouse, devoted parent, devoted bereaved, the blaze that claimed all my possessions, and the offspring who claimed whatever remained. Randall absorbed it all without a word, his golden gaze fixed steadily on me. Once I'd concluded, he stayed quiet for an extended beat. "My regrets," he uttered at last. "Regrets for Robert, your home, your child, but no regrets for your reaching out. Why?" My query emerged softer than planned. He extended over the surface and clasped my palm in his, firm as ever, tender as before, capable still of quickening my pulse decades later. "Because my affection for you never faded," he murmured. "Because each bargain I struck, each triumph I claimed, each fortune I amassed, it was all to prove myself deserving when you at last returned. Randall, this might ring insane. I get that 4 decades is an eternity and we're altered individuals these days, but hearing your tone on the line earlier felt like the absent fragment of my existence snapping into alignment." I gazed at our linked fingers, his sun-kissed and meticulously groomed, mine roughened by labor and bearing every trace of my 65 years. "I'm no longer that youthful version you recall. You're superior," he countered. "You're authentic. You've experienced life, affection, grief, endurance. That 25-year-old was striking, but mere promise. You embody the fulfillment of that promise. Those sentiments enveloped my spirit like a soothing cover, mending scars I hadn't realized lingered. For the first occasion in more time than I could track, I sensed being truly regarded, not merely as a parent, spouse, or liability, but as my own self. What's next? I wondered aloud. Randall's grin appeared, that same captivating curve that ensnared me in our youth. Next, we explore how our remaining days unfold side by side, should you agree. Seated amid his elegant cooking space brimming with nourishing bites and promise, it dawned on me that occasionally the inferno ravaging your prior existence merely clears space for the path you were destined to follow. Sharing life with Randall resembled unearthing a facet of myself I'd long overlooked. The initial week felt odd, skirting one another like courteous acquaintances cohabiting. He offered me the full guest quarters in his residence, a chamber bigger than my past parlor, an exclusive lavatory boasting a basin for 2, plus a cozy nook facing his grounds. It resembled a high-end retreat where I hesitated to handle items or mark my stay. Yet Randall remained tolerant, as accomplished individuals often do. Slowly, I began to unwind. He employed a maid, Maria, arriving thrice weekly. On alternate days, though, I took to preparing his meals. It commenced modestly, brewing his morning joe, assembling basic midday bites. But Randall relished each creation with the zeal of one we'd dined on catered spreads and eatery options for ages. "This is outstanding," he remarked one night, relishing the fowl and dough pockets I'd crafted from my ancestors' formula. "I haven't savored homemade fare this fine in ages. It's hardly elaborate," I demurred, yet inwardly I shone. When had someone last valued my handiwork so? David once griped that I rotated just 5 recipes endlessly. Victoria even proposed experimenting with modern tastes for gatherings. Randall dismissed it. "It's ideal. You're ideal." That term ideal ought to have unsettled me. At 65, with silver strands peeking and facial creases etched deep, my palms bore age flecks, my form yielding where it once held firm. I wasn't flawless by any stretch, yet in Randall's gaze, I appeared to myself as lovely, deserving of affection, notice, and tender handling. Our days settled into habits that flowed as effortlessly as inhaling. We'd share morning meals on the rear veranda, where he'd pore over industry updates while I observed the birds flocking to his ornate feeders. Afternoons brought strolls across the estate, with him pointing out the flower beds he'd cultivated personally and the conservatory nurturing his passion project, exotic orchids. Nights turned to conversation. With 4 decades to bridge, we unraveled it gradually, meticulously, akin to scholars unearthing fragile relics. I shared the agony of Robert's passing, the void that hollowed the home in the ensuing months, the daily battle to rise from sleep, the isolation of being widowed, how others began viewing you as incomplete after your spouse departed. He opened up about his enterprise, its evolution from a modest building outfit into a sprawling real estate powerhouse spanning initiatives across 3 states, and the partners he'd pursued over time. Intelligent, high-achieving types who seemed ideal beside him at fundraising events, yet none truly completed him. One evening, by the hearth as precipitation pattered on the panes, he mentioned Elena, a gifted designer, stunning and sharp. The consensus was we'd make an ideal match. A sharp twinge of envy caught me off guard with its force. What went wrong? I asked him to wed, he replied softly. It was Christmas Eve 5 years back. Lavish affair at a spot with city views, lavish gem, all she'd dreamed of, and she accepted. We set the ceremony for the next summer, but as the deadline neared, doubt gnawed at me. Not about her. She embodied every ideal for a spouse. It was me. He halted, eyes fixed on the flames. The eve of the nuptials, I ended it. Randall, no way. What explanation did you give? Honesty. His stare met mine, earnest, that my affections lingered for a woman from 40 years prior, and wedding her would betray us both with my loyalty elsewhere. The admission struck like a forceful impact. You halted your engagement over me, over the echo of me, the chance that one day, by some twist, I might seek you out and find you ready. Gazing at this thriving, attractive figure who could have chosen freely, I grappled with his confession. This sounds insane, I murmured. It does. He shifted closer, clasping my hands. More so that you'd carried my contact in your purse across 4 decades. He had a point. Absolutely, we were both unhinged. We dwelled amid specters of lost potentials. But remarkably, our shared madness had reunited us, defying expectations. 3 weeks into my stay, David rang. I stood in Randall's galley, whipping up supper, softly singing, a melody I hadn't voiced in ages, when the device buzzed. Spotting David's label twisted my gut with old unease. "Hi, son," I answered, aiming for evenness. "Mom," his voice carried an unusual restraint. "I've attempted reaching you. It routes directly to messages." Accurate. I'd filtered incoming lines, unprepared for any reproach or duty he'd levy. Things have kept me occupied. Occupied how? Word is you vacated the inn ages back. What's your address now? I scanned the elegant space of Randall's cooking area, the blooms he'd fetched that dawn, the fine crystal stemware lined on the surface, crashing at a buddy's place. Which one? "Mom, since when do you run in affluent circles?" The implication stung, especially since it rang true post-Robert. I'd allowed bonds to wither, drained and haughty, unable to reciprocate when I offered zilch. "Surprised, are you?" I replied icily. Silence stretched. I sensed him digesting it. "Mom, let's chat." Victoria and I mulled over matters. We figure we rush judgment. Perhaps bunk in our spare quarters temporarily till you're steady again. The proposition, once a lifeline, now rang empty, even demeaning. What shifted your stance? More quiet. We saw we'd fixated on ourselves unduly. Kin ought to unite. Beneath it, I discerned he'd likely caught wind via local chatter that his parent had ditched the budget lodging. Whispers of her alongside a sharp-dressed gent in a sleek ride. David's intrigue had sparked benevolence. That's thoughtful, I noted, though I'm content as is. "Mom," Shacking up with an unknown's risky. Who's this individual anyway? He's the one who's never cast me as a weight, I responded gently. I know he cherishes my presence and enjoys the meals I prepare, and he lets me know daily that he finds me stunning. Our wedding differed greatly from my initial one. When I wed Robert 4 decades back, it revolved around societal pressures: a pristine white gown, a traditional church service, and a gathering at the local hall featuring a disc jockey and an open bar where guests paid for drinks. We extended invitations to all acquaintances, plus a few folks we barely tolerated, simply because tradition demanded it. We went through the motions to satisfy others, not out of personal desire. With Randall this time, we followed our own desires completely. The event unfolded in his garden on a chilly November day, 5 months following that unexpected hotel conversation. His longtime friend served as the officiant, with just Maria, the maid, and Marcus, his colleague and confidant of 25 years, as guests. I chose a modest blue outfit that he claimed complemented my gaze perfectly, while he donned a silver suit that lent him an air of elegance and appeal. No elaborate preparations, no extravagance, no pressure to dazzle outsiders, merely two souls reconnecting after 40 years, vowing to share their remaining days. David attended the ceremony. I hesitated over whether to include him at all, but Randall urged me to extend the olive branch once more. He's family, he put it plainly. Regret will haunt you if you don't let him attempt reconciliation. Thus, I reached out 2 weeks prior. Randall and I are tying the knot, I stated bluntly. November 15th at 2 p.m. Feel free to join, but leave Victoria behind. He arrived solo, appearing uneasy in attire, likely pricier than my entire food stipend for a month. He offered a courteous handshake to Randall, exchanged brief pleasantries, and even mustered an awkward grin as the officiant pronounced us partners for life. Yet I noticed the scheming glint in his gaze, the way he scanned Randall's residence, his vehicle, and the clear signs of affluence. This morning, I awoke nestled in Randall's embrace, within my spouse's hold, in the space that's now shared, inside the dwelling we've made our sanctuary. Rays of sun poured through the panes, facing the landscapes we nurture side by side, and the aroma of the coffee he brews each dawn before I stir filled the air. At 66, I've reached a level of joy unmatched in my life, not due to his fortune, his lovely residence, or his accomplishments, but because a person perceives me genuinely and elects to adore that authentic self. The blaze devoured my previous existence, reducing it to cinders. But at times, as I observe Randall perusing his daily news over our morning meal, I reflect that devastation merely signifies rebirth. Occasionally, one must surrender all the pursuits once deemed essential to uncover what the heart truly craves. And on rare, fortunate occasions, an early romance earns another opportunity to evolve into an enduring bond. The card from 40 years past now rests in a frame on Randall's workspace in his study, a token that certain commitments merit honoring, no matter the 4-decade wait to fulfill them. Enjoy the tale. And from which town are you tuning in? Join the discussion below. If the narrative resonated, show your backing with a super thanks to help me deliver additional tales like this. Your kind gestures mean the world. Thanks a ton. I eagerly await your thoughts on it. Check the display for 2 fresh personal accounts I suggest checking out. My page holds plenty more. Hit subscribe if you haven't. Catch you for the upcoming heartfelt tale, full of warmth and admiration. Loved the story. And what city are you watching from? Drop in on the comments. If it touched you, lend support via a super thanks so I can continue sharing pieces like this. Grateful beyond words for your generosity. Thank you kindly. Can't wait to hear your reactions. You'll spot 2 recommended new life tales on screen. So much awaits on my channel. Remember to subscribe. Until the next inspiring story, with affection and regard.